It started with a scream, not from the mansion's marble halls, but from deep inside the heart of a child who hadn't spoken in years. Nobody dared enter the East Wing. They said the boy who lived there, the billionaire's son, was cursed. Some whispered he'd been paralyzed in a mysterious accident no one was allowed to talk about. Others said he was born that way. But what every single staff member at the sprawling Zahir estate knew was this. No one touched the boy. No one fed the boy. Only the nurse, paid in silence, ever went inside that room. Until her, Amira didn't know she was breaking a rule. She was just the new housekeeper, a poor African village girl hired through a cleaning agency, thrown into the mansion like dust in the wind. She'd only meant to drop off fresh linens. But what she found inside that cold, dark room would change her life and tear apart the billionaire's empire. There he was, Malik, no older than 6, eyes hollow, legs limp, trembling with hunger. The tray of untouched food sat beside him like a cruel joke. His lips were dry, his voice gone, and so, without thinking, Amira did the unthinkable. She sat beside him and began to feed him, whispering stories, sweet and low like a mother's lullaby. She wiped his face with her own scarf. She smiled when he flinched. And then, for the first time in months, he smiled back. She didn't hear the door open. She didn't feel the heat of rage behind her. But when Khalid al-Hazari, the notorious Arab billionaire known for crushing empires and mistresses alike, walked in, his expression froze. There she was, the maid he didn't remember hiring, with her hands on his son. His crippled, broken son. And for a moment, the most powerful man in Dubai couldn't breathe. Who gave you permission to touch him? Khalid's voice was a thunderstorm, barely contained. Amira stood up slowly, heart pounding. He was starving, sir. He looked at me. Silence. Then the coldest words she'd ever heard, you're fired. But what Khalid didn't expect, what he couldn't expect, was that this woman, this nobody housemaid from nowhere, was about to become the one person his broken son would trust, and the one secret Khalid could never erase. Because Amira was more than just a maid, she was the ghost of a past he had tried to bury. He thought he was erasing a mistake, but what Khalid al-Hazari didn't realize was that firing her only unlocked a vault of secrets buried in guilt, lust, and blood. The household watched in silence as Amira was dragged toward the front gate, her few belongings tossed in a trash bag like yesterday's leftovers. The billionaire hadn't just fired her, he'd erased her. No one touches Malik, Khalid said coldly. Ever. Not even the boy's own grandmother. But what Khalid didn't say was why. Because Malik wasn't just his disabled son. Malik was his only weakness. Born from a woman he'd loved in secret, and lost in shame. That night, Khalid stared into the flickering light of his whiskey glass, haunted by what he'd seen. Amira, the way she'd held Malik's hand, the way the boy looked at her, like he'd seen an angel. But that was impossible, wasn't it? The next morning, his butler stumbled into Khalid's private study, white as a ghost. Sir, there's something you need to see. The CCTV footage. The billionaire's eyes narrowed as the footage rolled. Amira, standing over Malik, whispering something. Malik, nodding. And then, the twist that made Khalid's blood freeze, Malik said something back. It was just one word, but it shattered everything. Mama? Impossible. His son hadn't spoken in years. Doctors called it trauma-induced muteness. And yet, this strange woman, a maid from nowhere, had unlocked him like a door. Khalid slammed his glass to the floor. Where did she come from? Who hired her? No one had the answer. Because Amira wasn't just a maid, she hadn't come through the agency. Her name wasn't even on the records. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere, like a ghost from Khalid's sins. And what the billionaire didn't know was that Amira had a secret of her own. She wasn't just a kind woman with a soft heart. She had come on purpose. To find the son that had been hidden from her. To get close to the man who had taken everything. And to destroy him, from the inside out. The billionaire thought cutting her off would end the problem, but instead, it set his entire mansion on fire, emotionally, politically, and dangerously. It had only been 72 hours since Amira's sudden disappearance, but the mansion felt like it had lost its soul. Khalid's perfectly polished palace was now a war zone of chaos, and at the center of it was little Malik, screaming, sobbing, scratching his own face. He refused food, refused his tutors, refused even his favorite nurse. The only word he kept muttering was, "Mama, Mama, Mama." The staff whispered, was the boy hallucinating? Or worse, was the maid his actual mother? Khalid buried himself in work, slamming boardrooms with rage, humiliating directors, snapping at everyone. But no matter how many contracts he signed, he couldn't silence her face from invading his mind. Amira, the way she'd known the lullaby only Khalid's dead wife used to hum. The way Malik had wrapped his arms around her waist like he'd known her from birth. It didn't make sense, unless the impossible was true. Unless the woman he had so cruelly dismissed was the very woman he'd erased from his past. A mistake, a night he was told had been taken care of, a woman the family paid off to disappear. Suddenly, everything clicked, the look in her eyes, the hesitation in her voice, her complete refusal to flinch, even when he barked orders at her. Because she wasn't a maid, she was his ghost. Haunted, Khalid made a decision that shocked his entire security team. He got into the black SUV himself, alone, and drove straight to the slums where she'd last been seen. And there, in the back alley of a rundown soup kitchen, he found her. Serving meals, smiling, like she hadn't just ripped his entire world apart. He stepped out of the car. "Come back to the house," he said through clenched teeth. Amira turned slowly, a ladle in hand, eyes icy. "No, Malik needs you." She wiped her hands and looked him in the eye. "No, you need me. And I don't belong to you anymore, Khalid." But she was wrong. Because what she didn't know was that Khalid had just discovered the DNA results from the hospital's secret test. And they confirmed what he feared most. Malik wasn't just her son. He was theirs. Together, just when she thought she was free, she vanished without a trace, and the person who took her, someone she once trusted with her life. The next morning, Amira never showed up at the soup kitchen. By noon, she wasn't answering her phone. By nightfall, she had disappeared. Khalid knew something was wrong the second he got the call from the volunteer center. He raced to her apartment, door busted open, clothes scattered, no sign of a struggle, but her pendant was gone. The one she never removed. The one that contained a tiny picture of Malik when he was just a baby, the only picture from that time. Security footage was wiped clean. No witnesses, no ransom. It wasn't a robbery, it wasn't random, this was personal, and Khalid had a terrifying hunch. He stormed into his father's estate, the man behind the family fortune, now wheelchair-bound, but still wickedly powerful. "Where is she?" Khalid barked. His father blinked. "I don't know who you mean." Khalid slammed the DNA envelope onto the glass table. "She's the mother of my child. You knew all along." His father didn't even flinch. "She was never supposed to come back. We paid her to disappear. You were too drunk to remember that night. We cleaned up your mess." Khalid's fists clenched. "You mean you stole my son? I saved your legacy," his father spat. Khalid stared at him, seething. But then, something clicked. He stormed out of the mansion, straight into the hidden vault beneath his own estate, a place even his father rarely touched. The family lawyer had once hinted that Khalid's late mother had left a secret will, written days before she died in a car crash. He found it, and it was devastating. His mother knew everything. The night of the party. The girl named Amira, the child, and most importantly, she wanted Amira and her child to inherit part of the estate, to protect the bloodline from the toxic rot in the Al-Masari name. Which meant one thing. His father wasn't just hiding Amira, he had motives to silence her. Forever, Khalid now had two enemies, his bloodline and the clock. Because if Amira wasn't found in 48 hours, the lawyer couldn't enforce the secondary clause of the will, and everything would revert to Khalid's twisted older brother, the one who always resented Khalid being the heir. Meanwhile, miles away, Amira opened her eyes, gagged, bound, in a cold, dim basement. And standing above her, not Khalid's father, not his brother, but the family maid, the same woman who used to make her tea, smiling wickedly, whispering, "You should have stayed gone. Now, you'll never see your son again." What happens when a billionaire defies his blood for love, and everyone around him would rather see her dead than let her win? 46 hours left. That's how long Khalid had before the secret will lost its power, and with it, any legal claim Amira and Malik had to his empire. His face was plastered across international news. Not for his billion-dollar projects, not for his powerful investments, but for what tabloids called a manic billionaire searching for a mysterious maid. But Amira wasn't just a maid. She was the mother of his child, his first and only love, and the one woman he could never forget. And right now, she was in hell, tied to a chair in a wine cellar beneath the old villa the family hadn't used in years. The maid-turned-kidnapper circled her like a predator. "He chose you over his bloodline," she hissed. "You ruined everything." Amira's voice cracked. "You were like family to him." The woman laughed bitterly. "That's the problem. I wasn't blood, and neither are you. She raised the phone, pressed record, say goodbye to Malik. Back at his estate, Khalid's top security officer, Jamal, burst into the study, panting. Sir, we found her. Khalid's eyes lit with fire. Where? Jamal hesitated. That old villa your father banned us from searching. Khalid didn't wait. Helicopter in 7 minutes. Meanwhile, Amira had loosened one hand from the duct tape using a shard of broken glass she'd been hiding in her sleeve. The maid had gone upstairs to answer a call, something about the client arriving early. Client? Was someone paying for this? She slipped her wrist free. Her legs were still tied, but she dragged herself across the floor, inch by inch, toward the rack of tools in the corner. Suddenly, footsteps. Not the maid. A man, suit, foreign accent, face hidden behind a mask. I was promised a delivery, he said coldly. Where's the merchandise? Amira's blood turned to ice. She was being trafficked, not just hidden, sold. She crawled back into the chair, pretending to be still tied. Breath shaky, Khalid's helicopter landed with a roar. He didn't wait for doors to open. He leapt out before the blades stopped spinning. Gun in hand, by the time he reached the cellar door, he heard a scream. He kicked the door open. Gunfire, smoke, and the last thing he saw through the haze was Amira holding the knife, and the masked man, dead at her feet. But what shattered him most wasn't the blood. It was the torn paper the man had carried in his coat pocket. A contract, with his father's signature. The secret was supposed to die with his father. But she lived, and now, the truth is being broadcast live, across the world. The storm had passed, but the fire had just begun. Amira sat across from Khalid in his private jet, her wrist wrapped in gauze, her lips trembling not from fear, but from the shock of what she'd survived. Beside her, Malik slept soundly for the first time in weeks. His tiny fingers clutched a stuffed camel Khalid had personally bought in Abu Dhabi. But Amira couldn't relax, not with what Khalid had shown her. A hidden clause in his father's will. A clause that disinherited Khalid the moment he fathered a child with anyone who wasn't approved by bloodline. Meaning, Malik's existence was Khalid's downfall, but also his redemption. Instead of cowering under shame or pressure from the board of directors or the royal cousins circling like vultures, Khalid did something unthinkable. He held a press conference. The room was packed, royal watchers, international media, critics, billionaire investors, all expecting Khalid to deny the child, denounce Amira, protect his power, but instead, he walked in holding Malik in one arm and Amira's hand in the other. His first words? I lost an empire to gain a soul. Gasps filled the air, flashbulbs exploded like fireworks. This woman, he said, was never just a housekeeper. She's the only person in my life who saw my brokenness and stayed. And this boy? He is my heir, whether the world accepts it or not. The media erupted. Royal traditionalists called it a scandal. Twitter exploded with hashtags like #Maid to Madam and #Billionaire baby bomb. But what no one knew, Amira had her own secret. After the press conference, she sat Khalid down in private, pulled out a box, opened it. Inside, her birth certificate, and a letter from her late grandmother. Turns out Amira was no ordinary maid. Her grandmother had once been the exiled wife of a powerful North African ruler, banished during a coup, stripped of titles, and forced into hiding. Amira wasn't just Khalid's love. She was royalty, a fallen queen who'd unknowingly returned to a throne that once belonged to her family. Khalid stared in disbelief. You outrank me? She smirked. Technically, yes. The two burst into laughter, tears, and a kiss so passionate the staff awkwardly cleared the room. Fast forward 6 months, Khalid and Amira were married in a small, private beach ceremony in Zanzibar. No tabloids, no gold-plated carriages, just love, ocean breeze, and Malik's happy giggles echoing through the sand. The world kept talking, but for once, Amira didn't care. She was no longer the maid hiding behind closed doors. She was the mother of the next generation, and the woman who brought a billionaire to his knees, not with money, but with love.